Right now, as you watch this, there are Marines living inside a sinking ship in the middle of the South China Sea. Not metaphorically sinking, actually sinking. The hull has holes in it. The lower decks flood. There is no refrigerator, no running water, and most of the time, no electricity. The men inside eat canned beans, sleep under mosquito nets, and fish off the side to pass the time. They have memorized every line of every movie they own. And they are not there by accident. They were ordered there. And their government will not let them leave. Because that rusting 80-year-old sinking ship is the only thing standing between the Philippines and losing claim to waters that could be worth several $trillion. Trillion, with a T. Here's what makes this story different from any other standoff you have heard about. If a single one of those Marines is killed, the Philippines has publicly stated it will invoke a treaty that legally obligates the United States of America to go to war. Not a local dispute, not a diplomatic incident. A formal obligation, signed in 1951, that could pull the most powerful military on Earth into direct conflict with China. And the thing at the center of all of it is a World War II landing craft from Indiana that has not floated properly since 1999. This is the story of the BRP Sierra Madre, and it is one of the strangest, most consequential, and most human stories in the history of naval warfare. Here is how it happened, step by step, and why it matters right now. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to 1944, because this ship has lived more lives than almost any vessel in history, and every single one of them matters. She was built in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and launched into the Ohio River as the USS Harnett County. A flat-bottomed landing ship designed for one specific and brutal purpose: to beach herself deliberately so that troops and vehicles could pour directly onto shore without needing a harbor. No pier, no dock, just drive the whole ship into the sand as far as it will go, drop the front ramp, and let everything out. Ships like her made the Pacific Island landings possible. Ships like her helped end the Second World War. After the war, she served in Japan during the American occupation. Then she sat in storage. Then Vietnam started, and she was pulled out again, fitted with a helicopter pad, and sent into the Mekong Delta to do exactly what she was built to do: beach herself in impossible places and deliver things. By 1970, Nixon was pulling troops out of Vietnam and leaving some of the hardware behind. And so the USS Harnett County was handed to the South Vietnamese Navy. She served them for 5 years. And then came the day that changed everything. In April 1975, the South Vietnamese government collapsed in a matter of days. What followed was one of the most chaotic evacuations in modern history. And somewhere in that chaos, this ship, already old, already worn, suddenly had more than 3,000 people on board. Not soldiers, civilians, people who had grabbed whatever they could carry and gotten onto anything that would float. And this flat-bottomed landing craft from Indiana sailed out into the South China Sea with more than 3,000 human beings on board, no food for most of them, and nowhere to go. They spent a week at sea like that, people hanging onto the sides. Children, families, no destination, no plan. The Philippines refused to let them land. And here is the moment where a paperwork technicality saved 3,000 lives. The Americans argued that because the ship had been built in Indiana, christened in the Ohio River, and flagged as American, there was still small print in the transfer agreement that kept American interests attached to it. So they went to the Philippines and said, "What if we instruct the captain to raise the American flag again? Then will you let them land?" It worked. 3,000 people came ashore. And as a thank you, the United States looked at all the other old American vessels now cluttering Filipino waters and said, "If any of them still float, you can have them." And so, in 1976, the USS Harnett County became the BRP Sierra Madre, the newest ship in the Filipino Navy, which tells you everything you need to know about the state of the Filipino Navy. By the early 1990s, the Philippines had a new problem. American troops had been forced out of their bases by Filipino nationalists who wanted full sovereignty. For the first time in over 400 years, no foreign military was on Filipino soil. And suddenly, the Philippines was alone, defending its maritime borders with aging American surplus equipment in the most contested body of water on Earth. The South China Sea sits above estimated oil and gas reserves worth trillions of dollars. Half the world's fishing vessels operate there. And every tiny reef, every atoll, every feature that barely breaks the surface at low tide is claimed by multiple countries, because controlling that feature means controlling the economic zone around it, and the economic zone might be sitting above a fortune. In 1994, China announced it was going to a reef called Mischief Reef to build some shelters for local fishermen. The Philippines said that was not what was happening. And they were right. Within a year, it was a fortified military outpost. China had simply moved in, built on it, and that was that. And the Philippines realized something terrifying. Every reef they appeared to concede could cost them billions. They were losing ground without a single shot being fired, and they had to do something about it before they lost everything. So here is what they did. And this is the part that sounds like it cannot possibly be true, but it is. About 20 miles from Mischief Reef sits another feature called Second Thomas Shoal. In 1999, the Philippine president gave an order. They took the BRP Sierra Madre, already old and barely seaworthy, and they drove it at full speed into the coral of Second Thomas Shoal, on purpose, deliberately, and then they put Marines on it and declared it an active Philippine naval outpost. The plan was simple and brilliant in the way that only desperate plans can be. You cannot build a military base on a reef without triggering an international incident. But if you already have a ship there, and that ship has Marines on it, and those Marines are part of your Navy, then that reef is defended. The ship does not need to float well. It does not need to move. It just needs to be there. That was 26 years ago. The ship has been there ever since, and so have the Marines. Now here is what I want you to hold on to. Because behind all of this geopolitics, there are human beings living inside a rusting hull, and their story is the one that stays with you. Anywhere between 10 and 20 Filipino Marines are stationed on the BRP Sierra Madre at any given time. Below deck is a maze of flooding compartments, rotting metal, cockroaches, mattresses, and mosquito nets. There is no refrigerator, no running water. The electricity depends on a generator that does not always work. When it does, the Marines watch DVDs. They have reportedly memorized every single line of every movie they own. Above deck, they fish. They sit. They watch the horizon. On good days, when a friendly ship from another country passes close enough, some of them are allowed on board for a single hot meal and a shower. The lucky ones get to swap out a couple of DVDs for new ones. When they rotate out after months of this, they come home to a hero's welcome, because the Philippines understands exactly what those men are doing there. They are not just guarding a rusty old ship. They are holding a line that their country cannot afford to lose. And here is where the story stops being history and becomes something happening right now. In June 2024, a Filipino Marine was on a small supply boat trying to deliver food and water to the Sierra Madre. A Chinese vessel rammed his boat. In the collision, the Marine lost his thumb. Other Filipino Marines were boarded by Chinese Coast Guard personnel, physically assaulted, and had their equipment taken or destroyed. That was not an isolated incident. It was part of a sustained campaign by China to block resupply missions to the ship. Water cannons, military-grade lasers aimed at Filipino sailors, physical confrontations in open water. China wants the Sierra Madre gone. Their official position is that the Philippines made a secret agreement years ago to remove the ship and never honored it. The Philippines denies any such agreement exists. And in August 2025, the Philippines drew a line that changed the entire calculation. The Philippine president and military leadership stated publicly, on the record, that any Filipino death connected to the BRP Sierra Madre would be treated as a trigger for the Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States. Not a possible trigger, not something to be considered. A definitive red line. The exact words from the Philippine military: "The death of a Filipino will be grounds for invoking the MDT." Let me explain what that means, because this is the part that keeps analysts up at night. The Mutual Defense Treaty between the United States and the Philippines was signed in 1951. It has never been invoked in active combat. What it says, in the clearest possible terms, is this: if either country is attacked in the Pacific, the other is obligated to come to its aid. The Philippines has now publicly stated that if one Marine on that sinking ship is killed by Chinese action, they will call that treaty, which means that 10 or so Filipino Marines living on a rusting World War II hull on a coral reef, eating canned beans and watching DVDs, are functioning as a tripwire. They cannot win a fight against the Chinese Coast Guard. Everyone knows that. But if there is a fight, and if someone dies, the legal and formal machinery that could bring the United States military into direct conflict with China begins to turn. That is why the ship cannot leave. That is why the Marines cannot leave. That rusting, sinking 80-year-old landing craft from Indiana is, in the most literal sense, one of the most strategically important vessels in the world. And everybody involved knows it. In November 2025, when the Philippines sent another resupply mission to the Sierra Madre, it was conducted alongside a joint military exercise that included the USS Nimitz, one of the most powerful aircraft carriers ever built, along with Japanese and Filipino warships. China jammed communications during the mission. They watched. They did not move. The supplies got through. As of early 2026, 13 resupply missions have been completed under a fragile provisional agreement between China and the Philippines. China has never accepted the legitimacy of the Filipino presence on Second Thomas Shoal. Their long-term goal has never changed. They want the Sierra Madre removed and the shoal empty. The provisional agreement is, at best, a pause, not a resolution. The Hague Tribunal ruled in 2016 that Second Thomas Shoal is within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. China rejected the ruling. China has never acknowledged any court's jurisdiction over these waters. And so the standoff continues, month after month, resupply mission after resupply mission, with Marines rotating in and out of that rusting hull while the two largest military powers in the Pacific watch each other from a distance and wait. Think about what you are looking at when you look at that ship. An American-built vessel from 1944, launched in Indiana, that helped win the Second World War. That carried 3,000 refugees out of the fall of Saigon. That became a Filipino warship and was deliberately wrecked on a coral reef as an act of national defiance. That has been slowly sinking for 26 years, while Marines live inside it and the world's two biggest military powers orbit it carefully. It is not a monument. It is not a museum. It is an active decision made every single day by the Filipino government to keep men in that ship because the alternative is to give China something that the Philippines can never get back. And somewhere in that calculation, the Philippines is betting that nobody will fire a shot, that the presence of those Marines, and the treaty behind them, and the aircraft carrier that shows up when things get tense is enough to keep China from moving, that the tripwire will never be triggered, that the ship will just keep sinking, slowly, with new Marines rotating in every few months to eat canned beans and memorize DVDs. Maybe they are right. 13 resupply missions without a major incident suggests the fragile arrangement is holding for now. But a Philippine Marine has already lost a thumb in these waters. And the line between that and the thing that activates a mutual defense treaty is narrower than most people realize. The BRP Sierra Madre is still there, the Marines are still on it, and the most consequential question in the South China Sea is not who owns the reef. It is how long a sinking ship from Indiana can hold the line. That is the BRP Sierra Madre, a World War II landing craft that has somehow become the most strategically important vessel in the Pacific, held in place by rust, determination, and the presence of Marines who know exactly what they are defending and exactly what happens if they stop. If this is the kind of story you want more of, tell me in the comments which ship, which wreck, or which mystery I should take you to next. There are more of them out there than most people realize, and I am working my way through all of them.